While Michael Jackson was on the road with the Victory Tour, he made further headlines, this time on the business pages, by purchasing the ATV music publishing company for astounding $47.5 million. The purchase, believed to be the biggest publishing acquisition of its kind ever by an individual, was actually the accumulation of 10 intense months of negotiation. The seed of this venture had been planted a few years earlier when Michael was in London to record the number one hit Say 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 with Paul McCartney at Abbey Road Studios. Michael had become friendly with Paul and Linda McCartney during his stay. He ate most of his meals at their home outside of London. One evening after dinner, Paul displayed a thick booklet of song titles to which he owned the rights, including most of Buddy Holly's material and standards such as On Leaves, Sentimental Journey, and Stormy Weather. This is the way to make big money, Paul said. Every time someone records some of these songs, I get paid. Every time someone plays these songs on the radio or in live performances, I get paid. You're kidding me, right? Michael said. Does it look like I'm kidding you? Paul answered seriously. In truth, Paul reportedly earns more than $45 million a year from record and song royalties, none of his own personal composition. Michael was intrigued. He owned the publishing rights to his own songs. Obtaining that right was the reason he and his family left Motown and Barry Gordy's Jubet Publishing house. But he always thought of publishing as a tedious business primarily concerned with collecting royalties and licensing material for other media. Paul explained that the world of publishing can prove lucrative, especially thanks to the CD explosion and the increased use of popular songs in advertisements, movies, and television. Songwriters often lose their copyrights for one reason or another. Sometimes they sell them for profit and short-sighted things to do, especially nowadays when so much money is generated to the music industry and often they lose them out of ignorance. As in the case of the Beatles, who simply signed away their rights when they were naive copyrights to a publisher named Dick James when they were young. James ended up making a fortune to the Beatles song. Then in the late 60s, while McCartney and Lennon were each in their respective honeymoons, James told Northern Songs, the company that continued to hold the rights to the Beatles' compositions, to Sir Lou Grade's ATV Music Limited. ATV's assets were later purchased by Australian businessman Robert Holmes, Accord's Bill Group. McCartney and Lennon's estate split with ATV the songwriting revenue generated by 251 of their songs written between 1964 and 1971, including Yesterday, Michelle, Help, Thursday Night, The Young and Winding Road, Hey Jude, Let It Be, and many others. ATV also held the publishing rights to thousands of other compositions, including songs by the Pointer Sisters, Pat Benatar, and Little Richard, including Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, Rip It Up, and Lucille. When Michael told Paul, maybe someday I'll buy your songs, Paul laughed. Great, he said, good joke. Michael wasn't joking. Paul would one day regret their conversation. I gave him a lot of free advice, he would later say. And you know what? A fish gets caught by opening his mouth. Michael's the kind of guy who picks brains. When we worked together, I don't even think he had the cosmetic surgery. He actually had the cosmetic surgery at the time. I got photos of me and him at our house, and he looks quite different. He's had a lot of facial surgery since then. He actually told me he was going to a religious retreat, and I believed him, but he came out of the religious retreat with a new nose. The power of prayer, I guess. Michael and Paul remained somewhat friendly, but Michael also kept his distance. He didn't want Paul to perceive him as being anything more than acquaintance, perhaps because he had a plan. When Michael returned to the United States, he mentioned Paul's book of tales to John Branca and said that he wanted to buy some copyrights himself, like Paul. John did his research and presented Michael with a list of songs that were for sale. Michael's first purchase was the Sly Stone catalog, including all of Sly's pop classics of the 1970s, such as Everyday People, Have Fun in the Summertime, and Stan. Stan was the song the Jackson 5 performed the first time they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now Michael owned it. For less than $1 million, Michael also secured other titles, including one of Diane's hits, The Wanderer and Werner Sue, Limberry's 123, and Soul Survivors Expressway to Your Heart. Excuse me. For the next couple of months, Michael was too preoccupied with the Victory Tour to concentrate on any publishing deals, but then in September 1984, when John Brecker flew to Philadelphia to meet with Frank DeLeo and Michael about the Victory Tour's problems, John casually mentioned the availability of the ATV catalog. Michael wasn't sure what kind of music ATV represented. Well, it happens to include a few things you might be interested in, John teased. Like, Michael asked, Northern songs. Michael became excited. You don't mean the Northern songs, do you? Yeah, Mike, John said. He couldn't maintain his enthusiasm. We're talking the Beatles, man. The Beatles. In fact, Paul McCartney had tried to buy ATV in 1981. He asked Yoko Ono to purchase the publishing house with him for $20 million, $10 million each, but she thought that was too much money and declined. Because Paul didn't want to spend any $20 million himself, the deal fell through. As Michael skipped about the room, whooping and hollering, John warned him that there would be stiff competition and a bidding war for such popular songs. I don't care, Michael declared. I want those songs. Give me those songs, Branca. John said he would see what he could do. He then telephoned John Esmond, Paul McCartney's attorney and brother-in-law, and asked if Paul was planning to bid on the catalog. No, Esmond said, it's too pricey. A few days later, Yoko Ono telephoned John and said that she had heard a rumor that Michael was interested in purchasing ATV. Then she spent 45 minutes trying to make John believe that buying the catalog was a terrible idea. John discussed the conversation with Michael. Man, she obviously just wants it for herself, Michael said, but doesn't want to spend the bucks. She's hoping the price will go down if I don't buy it. So buy it, Bronca. The next few months were filled with intensive and frustrating negotiations. Bidding against Michael were Charles Koppelman and Marty Badner's entertainment company, Virgin Records, real estate tycoon Samuel L. Freck, and financier Charles Knapp. At one point, John Branca cut off the negotiations completely. During these 8 intense months, Paul McCartney again tried to convince Yoko Ono to join him in a bid. When Yoko repeated that she was not interested, Paul decided not to bid. Meanwhile, Michael telephoned John Branca once a week for news. When Kaufman and Bednar had bid Michael's offer of $47.5 million, with one of $50 million, Michael was crushed. Branca, we can't lose this now, he said. You gotta do something. I know we agreed that we wouldn't spend more than $41 million, but I'm willing to do it. The Comet and Benny offer was being financed by the MCA company, so John made a telephone call to the head of the company. Avrin Azov, man, you can't give these guys money to buy this catalog, John told Avrin. Do you know that they're campaigning against Michael for it? Remember, you're a consultant for the Victory Tour? Johnny, don't worry about it, Avrin Azov said. I'll take care of it. Azov then pulled the rug up from under a compliment and Bender by refusing to finance their offer. John Burka had put Michael back in the driver's seat. Soon, Robert Holmes, a court, was telephoning John Branca and practically begging him to go to London and close the deal. John played hardball and acted as if Michael wasn't interested. Holmes, the court, offered to pay for John's plane fare, but John could afford his own ticket and didn't want any offers at this stage of the game. John agreed to go to Europe, and Holmes, the court, even said that if the deal wasn't closed on that trip, he would reimburse all of John's travel and accommodation expenses. After Michael gave John power of attorney, he went to England and closed the deal in 24 hours. Michael Jackson never signed the important history-making contracts. John Branca did. John then telephoned Michael long distance to give him the news, good and bad. The bad news, he was out $47.5 million. The good news, he owned ATV. Michael couldn't believe his good fortune. The same could be said for Paul McCartney, who said, "Someone rang me up one day and said, 'Michael has bought your songs.' I said, 'What?' I think I started to do things like that," Paul complained. "To be so much fun and then to buy the road they are standing on." After the deal was struck, Michael did attempt to telephone Paul to discuss the matter. Knowing his personality, that probably wasn't when he called. Paul hung up. Finally, Michael concluded, "Paul's got a real problem, and I'm finished trying to be a nice guy. Too bad for him, I got the songs, and that's the end of it." Robert Hillam, an analyst of the ATV and Quiz for the Los Angeles Times, explained Michael's purchase in dollars and cents. If, for instance, yesterday earns $100,000 a year in royalties from record sales, airplay, and live performances, Lennon Estate and McCartney as co-writers divided about 50% of that income, about $25,000 each. The publisher, now Michael Jackson, collects the other 50%. The publisher also controls the use of the song in terms of films, commercials, and stage productions. Yesterday, in particular, probably earns considerably more. As soon as Michael made the purchase, he and his representatives investigated tactics to make it pay for him. He hired a staff to develop an anthology series and 4 films using the Beatles' music, including Strawberry Fields, an animated feature, Back in the USSR, a movie based on Russian rockers, and films based on Eleanor Rigby, and The Fool on the Hill. Michael also planned musical greeting cards and music boxes. When he licensed Revolution to Nike for a sneaker advertisement, he obtained Yoko Ono's consent, but not Paul McCartney's. In fact, Paul, like many Beatles fans, felt Michael was cheapening the music. In the end, though, Paul had to accept Michael's decision. Every time Paul performed one of those songs, he wrote between 1964 and 1971, he had to pay Michael. When Michael sold All You Need Is Love to Panasonic for $240,000, Paul finally called him and told him that he was going too far. Michael didn't even hang up on him. He explained he felt using the Beatles' songs and commercials enabled the music to reach an entirely new generation of fans who would then buy Beatles records. I just don't like the idea that Michael Jackson is the only guy in the world who gets to sit in a judgment as to which Beatles songs can be used in commercials, Paulier said. His durable list, honestly, how he should have had that power. John said, I hope that All You Need Is Love will remain an anthem of the 60s, not become a jingle for a friggin' loudspeaker system. And I also don't want Good Day Sunshine to become an Oreo cookie, he complained, which I understand he's done. I think that's real cheesy. I don't think Michael needs the money. On the other hand, Paul owns the Buddy Holly catalog and had exploited Holly songs commercially many times over because, as he reasoned, Buddy himself, the commercials and his video actively wants us to earn money via commercials. It's her call. Yoko seems satisfied with what Michael did with the Beatles' catalog and called his ownership a blessing. She said in November 1990, businessmen who are artists themselves wouldn't have the consideration Michael has. He loves the songs. He's very caring. There could be a lot of arguments and settlements if Paul and I owned it together. Neither Paul nor I needed that. If Paul got the songs, people would have said, Paul finally got John. If I got them, they say, oh, the Dragon Lady strikes again. In 1990, Paul and Michael met to discuss what Paul called this Paul of publishing. Paul called, I put it to him this way. When we signed our deal, John and I didn't even know what publishing was. We thought songs were in the sky, everyone owned them. These days, even kids knew better than that. Last year, yesterday, passed the 25 million plays mark in America, which no other song has ever done, not even White Christmas. But no one has ever come to me and said, hey man, I really think you need a bonus. You've done great for this company. So what the is going on? You may have been to be content for the rest of my life to be on this deal I saw when I was a fresh faced 20-year-old. I've done a lot for this company. Michael acted as if he didn't understand what in the world Paul was telling him. Therefore, Paul spelled it out for him. I wanted to recognize in the deal that I'm a big rival for this company that he now owns, McCartney recalled. Michael told Paul that he didn't want to hurt anyone, and Paul said he was happy to hear that. He's a genuine bloke, Mike is. Implicated Paul would then save him. Michael promised that he'd try to work something out. The next day, John Smith, Paul's attorney, telephoned John Brecka and told him that Paul and Michael had agreed to negotiate a higher writer's royalty for his songs. John checked it with Michael. Heck no, I didn't tell Paul that, Michael said, annoyed. In fact, he's not getting a higher royalty unless I get something back from him in return. Excuse me. John passed Michael's comment onto Paul's attorney. Okay, then fine, we'll sue. Edmonds threatened. Well, be my guest, Bronco told him. When John told Michael that Paul might sue him, Michael laughed out loud. Cool, let him sue, he said. Meanwhile, go license some more songs, Bronco. Let's make some money. Let's run this thing like business. An associate of Michael said privately Michael's feelings was Paul had two chances to buy the company. Both times he was too cheap to spend the money. Mind you, Paul said to be the richest entertainer in the world, worth about $560 million. His royalties in 1 year came to $41 million, as Michael told me. If he didn't want to invest 47.5 million pounds in his own songs, then he shouldn't have come crying to me now. He's a hard-hearted son of a gun. Michael Jackson is, just like a father. And when it comes to Paul, Michael doesn't want to know anything. I got those songs fair and square, he said. They're mine, and no one can tell me what to do with them, not even Paul McCartney. So he better learn to deal with it. By acquiring ATV, Michael Jackson proved himself a preoccupied, hard-headed businessman, exactly the kind of entrepreneur his father Joseph would like to have been, but wasn't. Where Joseph bullied Michael and greedy, where Joseph shouted, Michael usually listened, but he too could be unreasonable. Where Joseph rushed and unprepared, Michael usually studied every single area angle, therefore reaching a decision, or at least he had someone else to do it for him. Namely John Breca. Indeed, Michael had the wisdom to surround himself with brilliant people and then allow them to do their jobs without interference. Joseph never did. He always felt that he had final say over everything. It's almost as though Michael had studied Joseph's technique and then tried to do exactly the opposite. However, what father and son did share back then, and still do today, is what they trust no one and can be ruthless to those they have vanquished. Rarely do they allow anyone a second chance.